Hello, I'm Charles Malet with a UK column interview, and today I have with me Jonathan Marshall, who is a professional falconer and horse trainer and performs with his falcons and horse at shows up and down the land. Jonathan Marshall, thank you very much for joining me and a very warm welcome to UK column.
Lovely to speak to you again, Charles. Thank you very much.
Not at all. And if in the audience you are wondering why it is that UK Column be talking to a professional falconer and horse trainer, it's because when I saw Jonathan perform at a show last year, he began by telling the crowd that this show was going to be the antidote to all that woke nonsense out there, and I was immediately hooked. Now, Jonathan, what I'd like to do is introduce you bit by bit, as it were, and a large part of your story is your upbringing and your childhood. So
Yeah.
before we get to where you are in life, will you just paint the picture of your younger self and particularly your interactions with nature and how that's guided you to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very important. And I'm glad you asked me about that first, because it really is the start of me being a very aware person who's in touch with nature. I have the most wonderful mum. I had a lovely father who sadly is no longer with us. But my mother has always been somebody who wanted to guide me towards nature. She's a typical northern woman, Lancashire lass, very down to earth, very plain speaking, doesn't wrap things up in frills. And I think that she, with a real purpose and consciousness, she uh, instilled in me an appreciation of nature, animals, and the countryside. And right from being as young as I can remember, I loved horses. I loved all animals. I was absolutely hooked on anything to do with catching little frogs and tadpoles, um, grass snakes when I got a bit older, hedgehogs and all the animals that lived in Lancashire where I was brought up. And when I got to about 10 years old, we moved out to the countryside from Southport, the town, but we moved out into the countryside. And my whole later childhood, say from about 10 to being a teenager, I rode horses every day. I went watching the kestrels in the local woods, a place called Witchy Wood, which was not its real name, but it was dark and it looked a bit sort of mystical. And the kestrels nested there. And I used to spend my whole life, my whole summer holidays, pretty much on my own, watching wildlife. I do have friends. I've actually got a huge circle of friends, but quite honestly, I prefer animals to people. And the reason I feel like that is because I understand animals. I struggle to understand people, especially now. It seems to have got worse as I've got older. So animals for me were a great comfort. They were also a sense of inspiration as far as kindness, as far as reality, the natural order of things, which human beings seem to have completely flipped on its head and be going the wrong way. And whenever I'm with animals, and this only happened the other day, I went to a local wildlife park just to go and watch some animals, meerkats, and there was a tiger, and and I just think, oh, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness I'm with things that make sense to me, because the world doesn't make sense. Now, my grandma, who sadly has also passed away now, but she always used to say to me when I was a little lad, I'm one of five, by the way. She always used to say, "Oh, Jonathan, oh, you don't know, but you will know." And I used to say, "What, Grandma? What do you mean?" She said, "You're a free spirit, you are." And she said, "You don't know, but you're special." Now, these days, being special can be a compliment, and it can be the reverse of being a compliment. Uh, but actually, I think she meant it as a compliment, because I think what she was trying to tell me, because she was also a very much a free spirit and very much a um, honest and aware. That's the word. It's awareness. It's a consciousness that she was aware of that so many people aren't. But she could see that I was aware of it as well. She used to tell me this over and over, and she called me a free spirit when I was a little lad. And as it got older, I used to say, "Grandma, don't tell me that. I'm not. I'm just like my brothers. I'm like my sister. I'm like everybody else." No, you don't know, but you will. Well, she passed away about 5 years ago, my grandma. No, actually, do you know what? Because of COVID, I hate marking time through COVID, but it's probably about 8 years ago. I'm thinking about it. As soon as she passed away, the day after she passed away, I was flushed with this unbelievable awareness, not only awareness, but also um, I started to see things that I had never seen before. It was actually quite a frightening experience, and it was unsettling because I couldn't explain it to anybody. The reason I couldn't explain it to others is because nobody could quite give me the answer I was looking for. Most people said, my family included, "You're losing the plot. You're mad. You've lost the plot." I knew I wasn't mad. To me, it was everybody else that was mad because they were living in this false reality that I couldn't relate to. And I got comfortable with this after a period of time. And I realized, and in some ways, not that I'm trying to compare myself to this person, but David Icke talks about his awakening, and it was a frightening experience. It happened to me, Charles. It really did. Everything suddenly was turned on its head. And now, with 8 years since that time to now, I look back at the little box that I used to be in, not a physical box, but a little um, invisible box of awareness where all the possibilities that I thought were beyond my reach were on the outside and I was in the inside. I look back on that little box now because I left it and I walked away, and I'm now turning back looking down a valley at this little pod that I used to be stuck in. And it's a great, wonderful, liberating feeling because I've realized that my consciousness has expanded way far beyond anything that I ever thought it would. Now, again, I know that to some people, what I'm saying might sound crazy, and they might think, "Oh, this guy's been smoking wacky backy." I don't, by the way. I'm very much into health. Uh, but I can see it really clearly, and it's an expansion of awareness and reality in a world which is actually trying to compress and shrink everybody's awareness of what's actually happening in the world, but not only what's happening, but what we actually are at our core. Recently, can I quickly just elaborate on this?
Yeah, go on.
Recently, I was on an airplane and I was looking at all the people in front and all the people behind. We're all crammed into this little metal tube flying through the air. And there's all the heads, several hundred heads. And rather than seeing people as individual people, it occurred to me that actually every living thing, whether it be a human or an animal, we're all portals. We're all portals of a much bigger awareness. So I thought to myself, if I died now, does consciousness and awareness die? No, it doesn't. It continues. The very fact that I, like you, live in a biological vehicle, which we call a body, and I can experience the world around me because of the uh, sight and smell and the senses that we have. That is the awareness that's me inside, being able to navigate the world that we live in, which we call life. But I realized when I look at all these people that everybody and every living thing is a portal of awareness, much bigger. And actually, that is, I suppose, a good word would be source. So, where did we come from? Well, we came from source, which is consciousness, and we live, and then we die, and then we go back to its source, which is consciousness. And consciousness is eternal. And not only that, we live in a very, very small field of awareness because we're invisible light. Frequency is all around us, occupying the very same space. I'm in my horse lorry now. And I know that this awareness that I can see and touch and feel and smell, smells a horse weed, by the way. I know that this is occupied by millions of frequencies that I can't see and I'm not aware of. But just because I can't see and I'm not aware of it doesn't mean they're not there. They are. They are there. Of course, we know they're there because everything that we see is vibration and frequency. And I just happen to be on this particular frequency right now, and I can access it because of my sensors. So that's probably quite a hard thing for a lot of people to understand. But the more you think about it, it's absolutely undeniable that that's true. So since I came to that conclusion, I'm no longer frightened of death. I don't want to die. I'm happy where I am at the moment. But I know that when I do die, this physical thing will die or cease to be. But me as an expression of awareness will go back to its source, which I know is a very deep answer to what you started off. But I've come to this conclusion not through people, not through books or school or any of that stuff, but by observing animals and nature And that is the greatest teacher of all, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually what you do say will resonate with people. Perhaps they would have put it in different terms, and the points that I want to draw on are your references to understanding
Yeah,
and awareness, because it was evident to your grandmother, at least,
yeah,
that you did have what it is that you're describing, and you've just finished there talking about education and teachers, and it's
yeah,
very clear that when you were in the education system what it
yeah,
was that you do have within you was not understood at all. Just tell me a little bit more about how it was that you were treated at school,
yeah.
particularly with regard to your views on spending time with nature and how you wanted to go down a particular path in life.
I'll preface this by saying, while I pour myself a cup of tea, incidentally, that I got the distinguished, what's the word? I can be very embarrassed to say that I went to Britain's third worst school. Okay, it was voted that Britain's third worst school. It's called Millscop High School, which is near Liverpool. It's actually Lancashire, but it's very close to Liverpool. And I went there, and I was in all the bottom classes, labelled a thicko because I'm dyslexic. I struggle with numbers and writing, although I've written 5 books now because I'm determined to beat it. And quite honestly, I hated it. I hated school. I loved the art. I'm very creative. That's one of my paintings. If you can see it at the back there, I paint a lot. And I feel naturally drawn to that, create all sorts, music, painting, anything. I love creating. But I wasn't academic in the least. And so because I guess I was struggling a bit at school, and also most of the kids in Merseyside were into, it was either Liverpool or Everton or Manchester United, you know, it was all football. I wasn't bothered about football. I like football, but I'm not mad on it. I loved my horses and I loved my falcons. So I was a bit of an oddball, really. I wasn't picked on, thankfully, but I think a lot of the kids couldn't quite understand why at weekends I wasn't down on the recce playing footy with all the other lads. I was off watching kestrels. The teachers also couldn't quite work me out because I think I was a likable kid, but the classic thing that all teachers say is um, if he could only apply himself to this rather than that, you know, he's easily distracted. Because I'd find myself sitting in geography or maths, looking out the window at a kestrel hovering over the canal just at, which you could see from my school, you know. Marshall, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. I was looking at a kestrel out the window, stuff like that. Or drawing on my school books, you know, when I'm supposed to be learning algebra. Well, for me, I've never used algebra ever in my life, ever. It's not brought me any benefits whatsoever. But all the time I was practicing my artwork, I now paint and sell my artwork. So I was actually learning a skill, even though the teachers thought I was just scribbling all over my books. So, yeah, I struggled at school. I just wanted to be off on the moss on my bike, watching the kestrels. I get emotional talking about this. And I just wanted to, I didn't fit in. I was a square peg in a round hole, absolutely. But I had the most wonderful art teacher, a guy called Mr. Lally. And I talk about Mr. Lally quite a bit, and I always get emotional because I think he was the only teacher in the entire school who actually could see that maybe he was a free spirit himself. He probably was. He was an artist. But he used to call me kid. He can call, well, I was not Marshall or Jonathan or he used to call me kid. He'd say, come on, kid, I'll show you this. And come on, I'll show you that. And he helped me with my artwork and he encouraged me. And he said, not to worry about all the things I can't do, but be good, be really good at the things you can do. He said, not everybody can be brilliant at everything. Don't worry about what you can't do, but be really good at the things you can do. Now, my teacher, Mr. Lally, told me that when I was about 12, 13. And do you know what? I still believe that to this day, because I honestly believe that every kid, no matter what their physical ability or not might be, everybody has got something that they can do really well. And sometimes it's a shame because, you know, as humans, we have two things that actually are a disability for us. Number one, we've got the language. And because we've got language, that means we've got the ability to lie. So I could say any old nonsense, and if I say it convincingly enough, people believe it. We only have to look at 2020 to see how that works. The whole world was lied to and kidded into something because of the language that we were told. And it was an awful time. But also, we're very fickle because we make a judgment on appearance. And how many times have you seen someone and thought, oh God, I don't like you? And actually, when you've got to know them, they're a really lovely person. There's a guy who works for me, his name's Arthur, and he's got a Mohican haircut, and he's got tattoos, and he's got a bit of a long beard, and you know, and you look at him and you think, my God, I won't want to meet him in a dark alley. Do you know what? He is the nicest, most gentle, kind, thoughtful, great lad. And I've known him since he was 12. I was about my late 20s when I met him, and his parents had split up and he'd gone through a tough time, and I felt sorry for him. So I said, come on, I'll teach you about the birds. And he became an apprentice to me. Then I taught him all about jousting, because I used to do medieval jousting shows. He ended up being a knight in my shows. And then when I was on Game of Thrones about 7 or 8 years ago, because he looks the part, I said to one of the casting people, I said, I know this lad. He would be perfect. They said, no, we don't need anyone. I said, no, but you haven't said, you really should meet him. No, we're not interested. So I said to Arthur, come over to Ireland where we're filming and we'll just walk on set and I'll introduce you. Anyway, we did that. We went on set and I said to this casting person, this is Arthur. She said, wow, he'd be perfect. I said, that's what I've been telling you. So you can imagine what he looks like, a Dothraki. And but he's the nicest lad. So because we make assumptions on people on how they look, and also we listen to sometimes lies and often believe it, we live in this very false sort of world. I've actually lost my thread even why I got onto this now, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just going with it. But with animals and with everything that I trusted in school, to do with school, I felt as though the whole thing didn't. I didn't connect with anybody apart from Mr. Lally, and I just wanted to leave and be with something, immersed in something that I really loved, which was nature, animals, and reality.
And I think throughout that period, you were told that that was the wrong approach, that you weren't going to make anything of
You're
yourself,
right.
that there was going to be no degree of achievement or
Yeah,
attainment. Now,
you're right.
what was it inside you, inside your mind, your spirit, that convinced you that you were right?
I really don't know. Quite often people say, how come you're so confident? How can you go and sing or perform in front of thousands of people? I don't know where that comes from because my family aren't particularly outgoing. I guess it's whatever it might be, self-belief, I suppose. Um, you see, sometimes people need reinforcement from external reason, from people, other people, or whatever it might. But they need their beliefs to be reinforced by someone else. Well, I've never needed that really. Um, my own beliefs and my views are reinforced by myself, which sounds really, really awful. I know. We're taught, particularly in Britain, that we're not supposed to like ourselves. It's called being a big head or a narcissist. Uh, Actually, I disagree with that. I think we should, first and foremost, before anything else, we should like ourselves. We should teach our kids to like themselves and actually not be ashamed to say, I'm a nice person. I'm good at this and I like this. Is why I admire, in many ways, some of the American positive spirit that they have. They're so positive and, you can do anything. And it manifests itself in reality because they believe it. And so because they believe it, they actually end up doing it. Now, in Britain, we're taught to be, the opposite of that, a little bit self-deprecated and not humble, because I think being humble is a good thing, but a little bit sort of putting yourself down all the time. That seems to be a national pastime. But I actually think that we should be encouraging children to be absolutely ecstatically happy with themselves as they are and what they can achieve and boosting confidence and teaching them that actually there is no limit to what they can do. All they've got to do is believe it. And you only have to look at sporting figures. Look at Muhammad Ali, one of my idols. Look at his self-belief. And that's the same with many boxers, particularly, actually. Prince Nassim Hamed was another. Um, Mike Tyson, that these guys believed no one could, that they were indestructible, no one could touch them. And so therefore it manifested itself. And I actually do believe that what you put out there, what you put out comes back to you. The reason I say that is because that is how I train my horse and how I train my birds. Um, when people see my falcons flying through the horse's legs at 100 miles an hour and whipping over the crowd, and they go, how have you done that? How have you trained them to do that? People say all the time. What even made you think of it in the first place? Um, it's building on confidence. You don't go out one day and let it go a mile and fly through the leg. You start off little and you build and you build and you build until you've got something that's so brilliant and it's so far from where you started off that people can't even comprehend how you even made the first step. And the legendary boxing trainer, Cus D'Amato, who trained Mike Tyson, he said, and I love this, this is Mike Tyson quote, he said that he saw in me a flicker, a flame, and he started to sort of add more fuel to and the flame became a bigger, and then it became a fire, and then it became a raging inferno. And so it could just burn down anything in front of it. But it all started from that little spark. That's how you train animals. And if that answers your question, I suppose that's it.
Yeah, well, confidence, I think, is something that we want to get to. But what I'd like to do now is just show the audience what it is that you've been referring to. You've talked about your falcons flying and particularly through horses' legs and stuff. So we're just going to play a video which is from 2024, which is your promotional video that you used for your shows. And then we'll talk afterwards about your approach in front of large audiences and how you deal with that. So that will give people an idea of the incredible amount of training that the falcons and indeed beautiful Amadeus must undergo to be able to achieve those things. And as you say, confidence is such an enormous part of it. And I think you're completely right in talking about the sort of push against confidence, against that inner sense of self. But just talk us through the process of achieving what it is you do. I mean, I know that's not something you can put into a nutshell, but how on earth do you get to that stage with animals, and particularly with regard to your sort of communication with them?
There's two parts to this. You have seen my show, so before we got talking, you were an audience member, so you know how you felt at the end of the half-hour show. From the moment I rode out, I was just some fella on a horse, and then at the end of the half an hour, you must have felt, because you came over and spoke to me, you must have felt elated and thrilled and emotional and all of those sort of things. Well, to get to the point where I can go out with a horse and a couple of falcons and get people from feeling how they feel to feeling elated, that has come about over, first of all, many years of experience and practice, but also every second of my show, every second is really carefully thought about and planned in my mind. So, as you will remember, when I come out on the horse, it's a big entrance. We come out, the horse galloping, your ears, it's all music and da-da and drama. because the first thing I want to do is get people's attention. There's no point me just trotting out saying, hello, my name's Jonathan. I have to get everyone's attention. So the big entrance is important. The next thing I said, and you picked up on it, is I said, the next half an hour is going to be your antidote to all the woke madness that we're all experiencing. Now, lots of people go, oh, this is going to be interesting, because so many people want to say what I say, but they don't feel confident or they don't feel like they can. So I know a lot of people think, oh, what's he going to say here? So I get their attention again. Now, I purposely start off by going back in time, and you'll remember this in the show. We go back to the theme tune from Black Beauty, and I talk through various different things from our childhood, because a lot of members of the audience will remember, if they're a similar age to me, I'm 56, so they'll remember the 70s and the 80s. So I talk about things that are key moments in their memory from when they were children. So straight away, those audience members feel, gosh, this guy's just like us, because they can relate. Because I'm talking about their own childhood memories. And this could be anything from Black Beauty to the Eurovision Song Contest to the music that was current at the time. And it sparks off a familiarity. So those people then feel like they know me straight away because I've told them about something that they remember, which is, memory is a funny thing. Often nostalgia makes things better than they were in reality. But I do that on purpose because then they trust me. I tell them then about the horse, which is it's true story. Amadeus came to me purely through set of circumstances. His previous owner had died. Amadeus was a stallion, untrained. They were scared of him. He came to me. And quite honestly, the day I met Amadeus, I knew straight away we were going to be best friends. We connected perfectly. You know, people say that, you know, people who get married, their eyes met and they just, well, it was like that with my horse. I met him, I knew straight away. We just got on so well. Going back to the show, then, of course, then I tell them the story about Amadeus and I get him to bow and I get him to rear and all the sort of things that people find impressive. To get a horse to rear is pretty easy, and to get it to bow is pretty easy. Far, far easier than doing something like a dressage test, which I couldn't possibly do because I'm not that good a rider. But I'm a good enough showman and a good enough rider to be able to make it look impressive. And then, of course, I introduce them to the falcons. And I often leave a lot of space, and you'll have noticed this in the show. There's lots of moments where I'm not talking. I'm letting the music, because I have lovely music playing, I'm letting the music kind of do the speaking, the talking, because the problem is sometimes when you watch a show, there's too much prattle and you can't get the audience to think for themselves. And that's one of the best things. Public speakers who aren't rushed, who allow gaps, they allow the audience, if you like, to fill in the gaps on their own. Is if it's just like a machine gun, you're not thinking about it, you're just hearing. So I purposely leave gaps. Of course, I let the falcon fly free and it flies off sometimes so far or so high you can't even see it. And then just when the music, which is beautiful music, comes to a crescendo, I call it back, it flies through the horse's legs. And so everything I've said up until that point, I've just kind of, if you like, put another layer on top of it. It's almost a bit like hypnosis. I've made the audience of sometimes 1,000 or more people think, God, this guy is not just telling a good story. Everything he said, I've just seen it. Falcon, a wild falcon, flown off, come back through the horse's leg. Incredible. So they feel then really confident in that they're in the control, a bit like when you get an aeroplane and you hear the captain's voice and he sounds sort of, ladies and gentlemen, you know, they always sound confident. It makes you feel better. You know, if you had someone who is stuttering and didn't, you'd think, oh my God, I'll get me off this plane. It's the same when you're doing a show. The person who's in charge has to be confident because that makes everybody relax and enjoy it more. Then the next part is I let Amadeus go free, and he runs free, and I chase him, and I talk about us swimming in the sea in Cornwall together. That then is another layer. It adds a feeling of freedom because not only is this horse doing everything that it's instructed to do, but then it's doing it of its own accord, and the falcon's doing it of its own. So again, the audience then are invested in the belief that what they're seeing in front of them is something really quite special and almost spiritual. And I actually do talk about that. I don't know if you remember it. I always say the next half an hour could change your life. Okay. And I say it with a bit of a twinkle in my eye, but I know it actually has done because so many people email me or message me and they said, I've never seen anything like that ever. And they become followers and it actually has changed their life. And then the very last part of the show, and again, you'll remember this, is I turn to all the kids, all the children in the crowd, and I tell them that not that long ago, I was just like them, sitting on the other side of the barrier, watching a show. And I thought, I wish I could do that. Wouldn't it be great if I could do something as amazing as that? And everybody said, you can't do it. You can't do that. Marshall? What Marshall? Jonathan Marshall, that idiot. He couldn't possibly do that. He's a nobody. And yet, here I am doing it. If I can do it, somebody who was in a dunce class, somebody who was labelled an oddball and a misfit, if I can do something like this and hold 1,000 people's attention in the palm of my hand and make them feel emotional, then they can do it as well. And to never let anybody tell them that they can't, because I'm proof that they can. And in fact, I want them to do it. I want them to go out and be whatever it is that they want to be. I want them to have the most incredible life, an incredible experience, and never, ever take no for an answer. And I try and build them up. Now, at that point, I can see people in the audience cry. I get emotional myself. I'm even getting emotional telling you this now, because one of the things I refer to is that about when I was told I was rubbish at school and I was useless. And I know it resonates with lots of people in the audience, because there's many, many people who are listening who thought, well, I was in the dance class. I was told I was rubbish, or I was dyslexic, so I was thick, or I was no good at PE, so I was told I was useless. And I can see it resonates with them. And I'm telling them how they've been overlooked by society. And everybody has equal right to have a life, regardless of what you look like, your abilities, physical or mentally. You have your life, and it's your life, and you've got every reason to make it fantastic. So that is such a powerful message. And then of course I fly the falcon free, and I usually fly the falcon that was told, because I got two which are rescued birds. They were basically going to go on the scrap heap, oh, these are rubbish, they're useless, they do, and they were given to me. And of course now they're fantastic, because I put the time and the effort and the love and the care into them, and they're brilliant. So I tell the crowd that this falcon is going to fly in the most dramatic way, and it's dedicated to everybody here who was told that they were no good. So, of course, everybody feels like they're all part of the same thing. And in a way, when that bird's flying around, they can see themselves flying up there with it. So it's a very powerful message. And of course, I finish and people come over at the end, and usually, everyone's hugging each other. So that's the show, if you like. And the message, the main message I want to get across, I want people to feel uplifted and thrilled and excited and amazed, but I want them to go home and feel good about themselves. So I often say, people say, what's your show about? Is it about falcons? Is it about horses? It's not, actually. It's about people. It's about people who, just like me, were told they were no good and that they were different, and they are a free spirit, and all they've got to do, it's very simple, is believe that they're fantastic and they can do something brilliant as well. So that's the whole message. Now, the very fact that I use a horse and a falcon, if you like, as the instruments for my show, in the same way that Sting could go onto a stage and sing without a band, but it's better when he's got a band. My band, if you like, are my horse and my falcons. And I've got two things there, which, first of all, are very beautiful. Secondly, are very emotional creatures. People get very emotional about horses, especially a black horse, because of Black Beauty and the Lloyd's Bank advert. And of course, the falcon represents freedom, because it's wild and it's free and it's fast. It can fly at 200 miles an hour. So those two birds, the birds and the horse, those two creatures really reinforce the message of freedom, actually, which is something I'm a little bit obsessed with. I'm obsessed with being able to be myself and be free. And I want others to feel the same. And I'm so frustrated when I see people who go through life like this, and they don't look around, they don't see what they actually are. They are Dave the Builder or John the Butcher, or they're not. They're actually one aspect of an awareness that's everything, and they only have to realize it. But you see, the reason that I believe that people, if you like, are hoodwinked, to use a falconry expression, hoodwinked into believing that they're limited, is because when we believe we're limited, we're powerless. When we understand that we are limitless. We're powerful. And the people who control us don't want us to be powerful because otherwise they lose control. So there you go. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the video footage that we've just watched obviously gives an idea, a very brief glimpse of what it is that not just that you do, but that the falcons and the horse does, or
Yeah.
that you all do together. I mean, it's very, very powerful, and being there in amongst that number of people is incredible. And exactly what you describe does happen to the audience. What I'd like to go a little bit further into is this sense of people being constrained in a way that animals aren't, but particularly
Mm.
with regard to thought. And one of the
Mm.
things I remember is you talking about people being confused,
Yeah.
whereas animals aren't. They know
Mm.
instinctively what it is that they are, and just talk a bit more about that. I mean, gender was one of the things that you
Yeah.
brought up memorably.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think it's incredibly sad that we're living in a time where authority figures are telling children that they've been born into the wrong body. Nobody's born into the wrong body. That's crazy. Um, and you see confused people who are dressing in a way that's totally bizarre, piercing themselves, dyeing their hair blue, cover themselves in tattoos. And that tells me that if you have to go to such an extreme to alter yourself, that means that you're not happy with yourself beforehand. You know, people who's covered in tattoos. Now, some people might have tattoos because they want it and they think they look good or whatever. But I believe that this kind of this latest thing of looking as bizarre as possible is actually because of a lot of it's social media. I think people are living in a false reality now. They have an image of themselves which is not real. Um, and they want to portray themselves as being something that they're not, which tells you that they're not actually happy with themselves. And also, this sort of transgender thing that's happening, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I think, firstly, uh, the control system, let's call it, that wants to keep us controlled, it's to their benefit if people are confused because then they're much more easy to manipulate. If you're not confused and you know, you can't be persuaded of something if you know it, if you already know what you're. But if you're confused, it's very easy because you're looking for answers to ask, oh, this is the way. So you can be guided in a way that somebody else wants you to be guided. So I think that this confusion of the sexes, and it's not just men to women or women to, whatever it might be, you get some people, like a little girl. This is crazy, but it's true. She went to school and she said she identified as a cat. So rather than the teacher saying, that's fine. If you want to pretend you're a cat when you're at home, that's fine. But when you're at school, you're a little girl and you're here to learn, and the teachers are there as the adults to guide and to help children understand. But instead of that, they said, okay, well, she identifies as a cat, we'll give her a litter tray. And they let her be a cat at school. Absolute total madness. I can't think of a word to describe how crazy, topsy turvy, and totally mad all this is. Now, I'm not a religious person. I do believe in a much greater force than us, but I'm a very spiritual person. And I believe that a lot of this stuff that we're seeing is actually satanic. And the reason I say that is because if you think of nature as being everything that's real and true and came from a greater place than us, because let's face it, we've only been around humans for what, a million years, a bit more. And nature, birds, reptiles, have been around for millions and millions of years. So, and also the natural order of things, the strongest, the survival of the fittest, that's the natural order of things. So if that has come about over millions of years and it's never changed because it came from nature, and then suddenly we come along, this confused society of drugged up, freakish people, and then try and reverse it all. It's the opposite of nature. Now, I believe that if you like, God, there's various different religions, they all have, but they're all saying pretty much the same thing. There's a God who controls everything. Well, I believe that God is nature. It's certainly my God anyway. When I go and stand on the cliffs or up on a mountain and look across the beautiful countryside, the sea, to me, it's the same feeling that you get out of being when you're in a huge cathedral. You feel awestruck because you're standing in front of the presence of something greater than us. And I believe that for me, that's my God. So if you're going against nature, in other words, anti-nature, that is anti-God. It's going against everything that's good and real and right. And so by trying to change your sex because it's the latest fad, it's a fashion or whatever, it, it goes against God in a way. Not that I'm preaching God at all. I'm just preaching what my beliefs are, or I'm expressing my beliefs. I think that the examples of everything that should be the natural order of things are all around us in every living thing. I'm looking at the grass, these bushes, the trees, the birds, the sky, everything. Their examples are everywhere. Every time you see a little tiny spider make a web in the corner of a window, it's a little miracle. It really, really is. How many more miracles do we need? It's everywhere around us if you can only open your eyes and see it. But so many people overlook that. They think that miracles are these devices that we're all supposed to be obsessed with, or iPads, and all of that is man-made, and most of it's lies, most of it's utter nonsense. So we're being guided, if you like, by a society that is pushing an anti-nature agenda. And I think that I feel very, very sorry for young people who might feel that when you're 20 or 25, you can become transgender and it's all very cool and current because it's the latest fashion. How are these people going to feel in another 10, 20 years when everybody's got bored with it and fashion has moved on and they've mutilated their own body? They're not male, they're not female, they're not able to have children. There are going to be a lot of suicidal people thinking, what the hell have I done? When I was a young fella, punks were the latest fashion, and punks came and went, like all fashions. If you pierce your nose with a safety pin or wear some, dye your hair blue, it's a costume. You can take it off and you can become a normal. You can't take the costume off when you start uh, you're taking away, mutilating your own body. That's a costume you're stuck with forever. And those poor people who are actually, I think, very vulnerable because they're easily influenced, there's going to be a lot of people suicidal, and that's not good for any society. And it's being promoted by media, not only television, radio, but in pop culture, on mobile phones, on TV commercials. It's everywhere, and I just look at it and I think, am I the only person who can see this utter madness? And why is everybody going along with it? Why are there transgender men twerking in front of little children? It's play groups. How can that be good for society? Why was it that a couple of years ago the White House had a transgender week and Joe Biden and all his cronies were all walking around with these ridiculous people who are totally confused and, in my view, mentally ill? I just despair, and that's why I say that my show, I'm there to entertain, of course I am, but how can anybody who has these thoughts and feelings stay quiet when you've got the ability to say things that actually most people agree with, but they just are too scared to say?
Yeah, I think that's very well put, and you hit the nail on the head with the anti-nature agenda. And of course, the paradox being that we're all told to fear what's being described as climate change, and that therefore we have to restore nature and restore biodiversity, when in actual fact, the opposite really is happening. And this is a constant battle against nature. Now, to go back to what it is you are able to do in your show, which, as you say, is to build up this amazing rapport with the audience by relating to things that are common ground, things from other people's childhood that resonate with them. And you then introduce these topics, which for a lot of people are things that they either would consider far too challenging or they'd never really thought about before. I suppose as the years go by, I mean, what sort of responses do you get from people who have not considered? I mean, I came up to you because obviously I had thought about this before and
Yeah.
it did immediately strike a chord. Do you get people coming up to you who have, in effect, had their eyes opened?
Charles, this is the great news. This is the great news about it. I've been expressing these kind of views for at least 8 years. And a lot of people, especially 5 years ago, because I had a lot to say about the pandemic, And they were like, oh, he's lost the plot. He's definitely lost the plot. And I have people coming up to me now and emailing me on a daily basis. And they say, do you know what, Jonathan? I, I thought you were mad a few years ago, but now everything you've talked about, I get it. I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Now, one of the things that you just touched on then, and this is something that I think now people are starting to wake up to. I've known that this climate change, utter nonsense, utter BS. It's so utterly ridiculous and so crazy. And they're pushing it so hard every time you turn on the television. It's obvious it's crazy and it's obvious it doesn't make sense. I've just driven through beautiful countryside to come back to Cornwall, where there was a field that a couple of years ago was full of cows or sheep grazing. Now it's a horrible, ugly mass of solar panels reflecting heat back into the atmosphere, which, by the way, we're supposed to be reducing it, according to all the experts. And also coming across Exmoor, looking out at all these horrible, ugly, inefficient, bird killing wind turbines that blight the landscape at every direction, not just a couple of dozen, hundreds, thousands of them. And that's all supposed to be in the name of saving the planet. And I'm thinking to myself, how can people not look at that and go, this is total madness, especially when they're inefficient? I know, because I study this sort of thing, that last year there were, I think it was 8 white-tailed sea eagles that left the nest and within the first week were killed by wind turbines. Okay. And people think that there's a lot of virtue signaling going on. And this extends into so many things that we've been brainwashed, well, not the likes of you and I, but the general public have been brainwashed into believing. And here's this: if I was to do, my brother's a caricature artist. If I was as good as caricatures as my brother, I would love to do a caricature of somebody's house that'd have a Ukrainian flag, that'd have a sticker in the window that says, I've had my COVID jabs, that'd have one of those rainbow flags in support of transgender. They'd probably have something referring to bird flu somewhere. And they would also have every kind of windmill, solar panel everywhere. So what I'm trying to say, I know you're with me on this, is that people virtue signal, and they do it on the Facebook or on the internet as well, because the latest thing that they're told to believe in, they go, oh, I'm a good citizen. Look, I've got my badge to prove it, you see. But what they're not doing is thinking for themselves. And it astounds me that people don't think for themselves. When you look at it, all the nonsense on television, and I'm talking about Love Island and, I'm a celebrity, get me out of it, and even the soap operas, and in many ways, sport as well. Those, I believe, are purposely put out to distract people, to make them look over there when really they should be putting the time, energy, and effort into understanding what's over here, but they're not, because they're so busy. It's like with a load of I don't know, a magpie. I've got lots of sparkly, frilly, shiny objects over here. Look at these. Aren't they interested? Oh, when actually it should be looking over in that direction. And that's the general public. And I love people. If I didn't love people, I'd just keep my trap shut and get on with my life, because I've lost work because of my views. I've been accused many times of being too outspoken. But actually, I do love people, especially the young people like my boys, my lovely children, my lovely young lads. And I worry for them and any future grandchildren I might be lucky enough in the future to have. I worry about them. And the reason I say this is because I want to be able to help society in some way divert from this absolute collision course where we're just ruining our future, our children's future. I suppose every generation, if I go back to my grandparents and their grandparents before them, they probably dreaded the future. I remember my granddad said, "Oh, I wouldn't change. I've lived in the best time. I've seen the invention of television, and I've seen the flight. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought that?" Because they were an older generation. Well, I now look ahead and I'm thinking, where the hell are we going to end up? And especially with AI, which frightens the life out of me because there's no restrictions on it. And with technology expanding and increasing as rapidly as it is, taking over all the jobs that people used to do. What is everybody going to do for a job when AI is doing it all? And the other thing about that, just quickly, well, I hope I'm not rambling too much, but here's a big fear of mine is that humans have emotion, and we have this thing that we were born with called love. And it's where we came from, the source that I was talking about earlier. I think the source of all our consciousness actually comes down to love. And when you see somebody die, somebody that you love, you realize that all the money and cars and none of that means anything. Actually, no, it means nothing at all. You can't take it with you. It's about your love, isn't it? How many people have you touched in your life, and how many people's lives have touched you, and how much love have you managed to share amongst everybody? As corny as that may sound, it's true. The thing about AI is it is devoid of love because it's digital. It doesn't have empathy, it doesn't have emotion, it doesn't have the ability to think for itself because it's programmed by people who don't think about the outcome. They only think about the information. And so this is why I always say to people, and I've written 4 books, 6 books actually, 4 about my horse. And one of the lines I put in there is learn to think with your heart. Don't think with your head, think with your heart. And if you think with your heart, and actually my dad told me this years ago, because my dad said, replace the word God with conscience and you'll be all right and everything will make sense. Your conscience makes sense. And actually it's thinking with your heart because hopefully what you have in your heart reflects your awareness or your consciousness. If you were to see something that you knew you had to intervene because nobody else was, you're acting out of love, you're acting out of compassion. And all of those things, love, compassion, empathy, AI doesn't have any of that. So it's like we're stampeding toward a world where there is no love, compassion, or empathy. And I think that is a terrible thing for humanity. Somebody needs to put the brakes on. And if I can help people understand that, maybe we have a chance of at least slowing it down.
Absolutely. And you bring out something really critical, which is that you have a you are in a position where you get to address a large number of people in many different settings over the course of a year, and therefore you have a very powerful message because you are able to communicate with people
Mm.
in that way where you captured their attention and
Yeah.
you realise that you do have a very important message to deliver. But at the same time, what you're dealing with is regarded as controversial, and you talked about that element of censorship. Can you just go a little bit more into how that has affected what it is you do and how you do sort of walk the line in terms of
Yeah.
being dictated to by your conscience, but also having to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that awareness that people could, of course, cancel your shows?
And have. Well, actually, I think that a couple of years ago I was too outspoken, and so there I did lose shows. I know I did because the show organisers said, "Jonathan, we can't have you saying that. I'm sorry." And but at the time I was angry, and the reason I was angry is we'd just come out of 2 years of lockdowns and shows being cancelled, and I had considerably lost a considerable amount of my business and had to sell my horse lorry. I had to sell some horses just to stay, well, keep being able to pay the bills and keep going. So I was angry and I was lashing out at society, and it spilled out into my shows. And even though many people felt exactly the same and they used to come and tell me, I realized that I couldn't allow that to be the overriding message. I didn't want it to be a show that was filled of anger. I wanted it to be a half-hour experience that was filled with truth and ultimately confidence building and optimism. That's what I wanted. So I changed it about 18 months, 2 years ago, 2023. And to end of 2023, I thought, Jonathan, no, you need to make this more positive, put a more positive spin on it. But it was a reflection of the anger that I was feeling inside. I think I've now hit the right balance because those people and the many, many of them who have no clue about what you and I have discussed privately and we're talking about now, and I know that we're on the same sort of page, but so many people have no idea of it. It's too much for them to be bombarded with information that goes against everything that they understand. And here's the problem with it, you see. When you express the sort of views that I express, you're challenging sometimes people's belief system that they've believed in for 60, 70, 80 years, and they don't know any different. And I come along, with my horse, my birds, and my beautiful music, and start telling them that everything that they think's real is a load of old nonsense, which actually I do believe. I do think that they're living in some sort of false reality, but I can't be that harsh about it because it upsets them. So I have to try and present it in a way that is appealing and hopefully might sow the seed for them to go, there's a few things in there that I really agreed with, and actually I'll look into it more. I've always said to people, I'm only just expressing my belief, and I believe that what I see and what I can express to you is absolutely right. However, don't come to me. Go and find out yourself, because there are so many sources out there to find out the truth. Um, all you have to do is a little bit of research. But the thing is, people are lazy. They'd rather watch Love Island or EastEnders because it doesn't require much thought. It's like flicking your you're going on to standby mode emotionally and psychologically. And actually, I was never good at school at all. I'm amazed how much I've learned in the last few years about American politics, about climate, about medical issues. And because I'm fascinated by it and it's frightened me, I've wanted to know the answers. And I've researched. I've been sitting up till 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes reading and learning and understanding. And I can now regurgitate all this stuff. My mum says to me all the time, how do you know that? How do you know about that? I've got a sister who's a nurse, actually. My sister, Mandy, lives in Switzerland. She's a nurse. And during COVID, I was expressing my views on it. And I said, Mandy, you are professionally, you're a nurse. This is what you do for a job. And you're not looking into any of what I'm telling you. You don't want to know. Well, no, I trust. And she works for, obviously, the World Health Organization. These names, now, I just shake my head. WHO, the World Economic Forum, and so it goes on. All of these 3-letter agencies that somehow or other have hoodwinked and fooled and kidded people into believing and having complete faith in them. And like my sister being one of them, who's a lovely, kind person and a bright person, but she can't look beyond it because she's told that's what it is and she won't have it any other way. And of course, well, you're not a doctor, you don't know. Well, you're just a bloke who trains. And they're right, I am. But I've done lots of research into these sorts of things. So when I'm expressing these things and trying to explain things, I'm not just kind of picking it out of thin air. I'm regurgitating stuff that I've really looked into. The PCR tests, all the vaccine injuries, all the things that we know have happened. The fact that things like hydroxychloroquine and all these other supposed things that were hidden from the public during the pandemic. I know all about that. I've looked into it. And so it amazes me that my sister wouldn't even consider looking into it and finding out another point of view. So with all that said, I know that when I go out and perform or have access to a large crowd of people, I do have to be really delicate about how I say it and present it in a way that will make them think without preaching too much. But will also, for the people who do know, because there are a lot of people where basically they're leaning against an open door. They're already wanting to walk through, but they just need someone to encourage them. I always think of it like we go to a party and the music's playing and there's an empty dance floor and everyone's thinking, oh, I want to dance, but I don't want to be the first one to get up. And as soon as one person gets up, everybody gets, and they have a great time. I believe now we're at a party and the party's just getting going because people are coming onto the dance floor and they're all saying, come on, let's go and have a dance. Because I can see a massive awakening taking place. I did a video back in 2020 and I called it The Great Awakening. I'll send it to you, actually. And I think you'll like it. I shot it when I was in Portugal. I got out of Great Britain because I just couldn't stand it. I thought I've got to go and live in the mountains. And that's what I went and did. And we really are going through, I believe, a great awakening. And it's happening much slower than I want. But it is definitely happening because I can see the people who used to look at me like this are now looking at me and they're saying, thanks for saying what you've said. And I thought you were mad, but I get it now. So I'm optimistic about it.
that's the only way to be. And I think it's amazing how we've sort of in a way come full circle from what you were told at school in terms of not applying yourself to the right thing, back
Yeah,
round to people in their professions being absolutely wedded to the idea that it can only be viewed this one way because you are a doctor or a nurse or whatever it is. But I
yeah.
must say, obviously, that you're I mean, I think we've got a sense of this through the course of the interview, but your show absolutely is full of joy, and it
Mm,
that is very obviously it radiates back off the audience. Now, Jonathan, what I'd like to do, just to round off, is to give people an idea of where they can find you either online or in person at a show over the course of this year. What should people do who want to know
right.
more and want to come and see you?
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you for that. Well, I've got about 70 shows in my diary for this year. The first one being in Easter, and then from then it's pretty much flat out till end of September. So they can find my show list on my website, which is jonathanmarshallshows.com. And I'm all over the country. I'm even going over to the Isle of Man to do a show out there, up in Lancashire and Yorkshire, and a lot of shows in, for some reason or other, in the southeast, sort of Henham Park's the first one in Suffolk, but all over the country, and of course a lot in the West Country because that's where I'm actually based. So you can imagine I do a lot of miles in the summer months, traveling around. So that's where they can find me. Any feedback, positive and negative, I willingly encourage, because I'm not right about everything, far from it. And if I am wrong about certain things, I would want someone to say, that's not quite right. And then they can, because we're here, all of us, aren't we, surely, to help each other understand. We're all aspects of the same consciousness, as I said in the beginning. And I always think of it like the ocean, it's all water, but it all has different currents and different persuasions and movements. And so to help me and everybody else really sharp focus on something so we fully understand it, everybody, it's great to swap ideas, even if they're not the ideas that you have. So I encourage it. I don't think debate and I don't think disagreement is a bad thing, actually, because it helps everybody in the long run to really focus more clearly on what we should be doing. So that's where they can find me, and I'd love to meet them. And please come to a show, or drop me something on social medias. I'm on the Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I welcome feedback.
Perfect. And we'll put links to all that in the show notes. Jonathan, what a lovely note to end on. And as you say, we are all here to help each other understand. Now, if you are in a position to support UK Column financially and you're not already doing so, then please take a look at the website and consider taking out a membership or giving a donation. And also, following the links that will be in the notes, please find a way of going to see Jonathan at a show and be amazed. I can absolutely testify to the complete wonder of one of his shows. So I do hope you'll find your way to one of those at some point this year. And so it just remains for me to thank Jonathan very much indeed for joining me at UK Column. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
My absolute pleasure, and I'm sending love to all of your audience. Thank you.